Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Mileage Mafia. This is our December series. We're doing tier lists, ranking all of the shoes we are most excited for heading into 2025 from a variety of shoe brands. Today's video is focused on the category of super trainers. You can see we have a shorter lineup today. It's going to be the Adios 9 from Adidas, the Endorphin Trainer from Saucony, the Endorphin Speed 5 also from Saucony, and the Mach X3 offering from Hoka. So to give a quick definition of what a super trainer kind of means to me is I would say it's usually something that incorporates some race foam. Maybe it's not entirely race foam. It sometimes has like kind of a daily trainer foam, either blended in or layered in for durability. It's usually going to be significantly lighter than most other daily trainers. It's going to have a faster kind of turnover speed as a result of that lighter weight. Oftentimes, it incorporates some kind of carbon plate. It's going to have a more race-like, lighter, more breathable upper. And overall, it's just kind of going to be a blending of the technology from a race shoe down into something that's a little bit cheaper, a little bit more durable, and a little bit more suited for workouts versus races. So we have a variety of different companies' takes on that sort of shoe in the lineup today. For example, something like the Adios 9 from Adidas, it's almost more like an old school racing flat oriented towards interval workout versus something like the Rocket X3 is kind of more so approaching a race shoe. Same sort of thing with the Endorphin Trainer. So do either of you guys have anything you want to kind of clarify on what you think of as being a super trainer?
I really like the definition. I think what you said, it's a cheaper version of a race shoe almost, and it's really good for workouts. I think some honorable mentions from this year would be the Nike Pegasus Turbo. I believe the Pegasus Plus was the name,
I think that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
and I think both of them had a pair. I think you guys want to weigh in on that, and then Evan got a pair of the Zoom Fly 6. My personal favorite super trainer is the A6 Super Blast, and I have a pair of the Super Blast too. I haven't gotten to wear it yet though, and it's one shoe that I'm really looking forward to wearing once I get it unboxed.
Yeah. And to add on, it's Evan, like you were saying, the feeling you get from this. I think an important part of these super trainers, like you said, with the speed and the turnover, they're really good at adding in some confidence to your workout, whatever you're working on. It'll be faster than a daily trainer, so you should feel like you're moving a little bit faster out there than before. So it's important to kind of look for that in a shoe for me. It just feels better. And I think that's an important part that, of course, you can't really measure with actual numbers. Of course, it is a feeling, but it is important. But yeah, otherwise, great definition.
Yeah, and while you guys were talking, it occurred to me that there was a shoe I was missing, so I went and I found a picture of the Boston 13, which is another offering from Adidas. So we'll put it over there with the Adios 9, as I think that's a very popular, very relevant shoe that a lot of people are going to be looking towards in this category. So without further ado, let's get into our first shoe today, the Adios 9. This one kind of probably the least prototypical of the super trainers that we're going to be talking about today. It's going to be very lightweight. It has the Light Strike Pro. It's a very low stack height. You can even tell looking at this image if you compare it to something like the new Evo SL, which is kind of more of a daily trainer. You can see very similar uppers with a very kind of reduced foam profile. This is kind of a continuation of Adidas old school racing flats into the modern era. Of course, people aren't really racing in these for performance over a distance like the marathon, but a lot of people still are preferring the very light, very kind of heavy ground feel option of something like an old school flat. So this is something people are going to probably turn towards for strides, speed work, maybe some easy runs if you're kind of into having a little more ground feel. And overall, I think this is going to be a really cool shoe. I think it looks really cool. I like how they have a pretty consistent aesthetic going between all the shoes they're dropping. They've got these big stripes over kind of a minimalist background. So I really like the style and definitely a shoe I would try. Probably one of the shoes I would end up not having a ton of use cases for, but something I'll really look forward to having a workout that I think it could fit towards. So this is something I would probably put in terms of B, and it would certainly be higher if I had a more of a use for a racing flat. But for me, it's going to be kind of a mid-level B. And Lakeland, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I kind of want to get fact checked on this. I believe this may be the shoe that when they made it so that the world record mile could get broken in road races, this maybe was the shoe Hobbs Kessler used. So if somebody could fact check me on that, I'll turn my camera off after I finish my spiel. But if it is, I think definitely mid B tier would be really interesting. I just think right now in my personal training, I'm with Evan. I don't have a strong use for the shoe. I think it looks really cool. I do like the movement that you're seeing where there's some really strong similarities between a shoe and the rest of the line. Like you see with New Balance, the Rebel looks just like the Elite shoe, which just like looks just like the Super Trainer. It looks like Adidas is kind of following suit with that, which is a fun thing to see. It's kind of a cool, especially when you watch videos of pros working out and stuff, and they have all these shoes that are for different uses, but they look super similar. I don't know. There's something satisfying about it. Um, so I really like that aspect of it. I think it kind of makes the lineup a little simpler um, to see, and it's hopefully they reduce some of the errors that they make because they're making things more similar to one another. So hopefully the upper doesn't rip because it's a very similar upper to something else that they have.
Evan, regarding this shoe, does it have the carbon rods in it? Because I'm wondering, you guys had mentioned not having too much of a use case for this, and that is completely reasonable, especially for when you're running longer distances, for not really using a flat. Um, but I was wondering if this is like a Brooks Hyperion Tempo with carbon rods, effectively. Is that kind of what this? If you were to compare it to anything, would that kind of make sense with the profile of it?
Yeah, I don't believe it has carbon fiber in it. I think it's just kind of a wedge of Light Strike Pro, which is their race foam. I could be wrong on that. I haven't seen a ton of information on this shoe, but I don't believe it has any kind of stiffening component. That's kind of the terminology Adidas uses for their carbon rods as a stiffening component. And usually in a shoe like this, it wouldn't be as necessary because there's not enough foam to require stabilization or stiffening as opposed to something like the Prime X Strung or even the Adios Pro 3 and that now the 4, where there's 40 millimeters of foam. It's highly responsive, so they add the carbon fiber in there. This shoe may, but I don't believe that's one of its defining characteristics. No.
Sure. So, I mean, I think we've mentioned it before. I am a huge fan of the Hyperion Tempo. You know how you're running a workout. While it doesn't maybe push you with without the stiffening component or without the carbon plate, right? You really know how a workout is truly going because you are the one doing the work. And while I haven't had too many encounters with a Light Strike Pro, the few I've had have definitely been intriguing. I've been a fan, not enough to go get an Adidas shoe, so I think I will end up keeping this at B. But maybe at some point, once I roll around to being more of an Adidas fan, this is something that can replace the Hyperion Tempo, which I did stock up on like crazy because they don't have that anymore. And I like that low profile feel without any carbon shank. So who knows? This might be something I roll to in the future because there's isn't too much like it, I guess. In this era of either tall daily trainer or carbon plated insane super shoe or racer, it is kind of unique to see a low profile slab of foam like that.
Yeah. I do want to point out it was the Adizero Takumi Sen 9. So I was wrong.
Yeah, the Takumi Sen, that would be kind of more like what we were just talking about, where it does have the carbon fiber components, I think a
Mhm.
slightly higher stack height, and it's kind of their 5K, 10K racer that people really like to use for speed work. I would have included the next generation if I had seen any leaked photos of it, but I think Adidas may be either playing that one close to their chest or they're going to give it another year to kind of let the success of the most recent edition continue. So, on to another Adidas shoe. This is going to be the Boston 13, successor to the very popular Boston 12. It's kind of an in between of a daily trainer and a super trainer for a lot of people. There are a lot of people that actually like to do this as a daily trainer, which seems pretty aggressive to me considering it has, the pretty high end foam in addition to some carbon fiber components in the midsole. So, not something I would probably reach for as a daily trainer, but a lot of people enjoy it for that. Apparently, the durability is great. It's responsive, not too heavy. People were not the biggest fan of the upper, so I think that's going to be the biggest modification. For me personally, I'm just not really sure where I would put this shoe, as it probably wouldn't be something I'd reach for as a dedicated speed or workout shoe. And it's also definitely not something I would reach to for daily miles. So for me, just because of my specific preferences when it comes to different kind of shoes for different days, I'm probably going to be putting this in C tier. Not because I don't think it'll be a good shoe, but just because I'm not quite sure it's something I would look for or have a significant use for.
Yeah, I'm not moved by this as much either. I think I know a few people who end up who do run in this as a daily trainer, and it seems to get the job done. I think I have other shoes, as we will very shortly find out, that I would go and reach for in a heartbeat over this. It's that the other brand coming up is probably the reason why I really don't know a ton about Adidas. Nothing they've really done up to this point has been enough for me to go buy them. So for that reason, I think it's all right in C tier. Hopefully that doesn't ruffle too many feathers. I feel like maybe I'm not giving enough credit for what Adidas does here. This is probably actually a B tier shoe, maybe even higher. But for me, it's just not something I really find myself reaching to. Yeah, I'll go C tier as well. I think that's fair.
I was thinking off of Evan's description, it would maybe be upper B, kind of that in between daily trainer and super trainer is kind of a cool place for a shoe to be, in my opinion. I just don't think for me this will be the one, and I don't want to hold DJ back anymore. And let's get started talking about those Saucony shoes that he's been eyeing.
All right, so up next we have two offerings from Saucony for 2025. We'll start on kind of all reliable, the Endorphin Speed, before moving on to a pretty exciting new addition to their lineup. So for those who aren't already aware, if that's even possible, DJ is a huge Saucony fanatic. He's kind of our Saucony guy. He knows a lot, and he has
A
some very strong
Saucony
opinions.
specialist.
Yeah, so he has massive, deep running history with the Endorphin Speed. So I'm not even going to introduce this one. I know he's familiar with the colorway. He's familiar with the shoe. So DJ, why don't you give us an overview and your preliminary ranking for where this is for you?
Yeah, sure. So for this Endorphin Speed, the trainer companion, super trainer companion in the Endorphin line, started out more aggressive, but as time has gone on, they've kind of moved it to be a bit of a softer feeling foam. Especially noticed that in the 3. Haven't picked up the 4, but I did have the original. And to me, this was the shoe that kind of made everybody realize, okay, maybe we don't 100% have to go get a Nike Racer. That Endorphin line in general. It was really impressive to see Saucony come out and just offer these products. For me, the Speed was an awesome companion trainer for the track, for the road, anywhere. Now, like I mentioned, they've softened it up a bit. Evan, do you know anything about the formulation, like the foam formulation here? And I am kind of cheating a bit because there clearly are two Saucony offerings. So I'm interested to see where they take this. So before I give it a rank entirely, even though I love this shoe, um, is the Saucony trainer going to be softer and they're going to firm up the speed a bit more? Do we know anything about that?
Yeah, so relative to the endorphin, or not the endorphin, yeah, actually, yeah, the endorphin trainer, the speed is definitely going to be firmer. So I think they're dropping the stack height a little bit. It's probably going to end up being a little bit less stable as they're losing some foam bulk from the midsole in general. And I believe it's going to be with their Power Run PB. So it's kind of been, they had Power Run, PWRRUN, or maybe just RN, which was their kind of PIBA top end foam. And then with the first generation of the Endorphin Elite, they created a new foam, Power Run PB. And that has now, in the next generation of the Endorphin Speed, that's going to trickle down to it. So the Endorphin Speed 5 is going to have the Power Run PB foam, which is definitely a lot more firm than the new foam that we'll talk about for the next shoe. So of the two Saucony Super Trainers we're going to be talking about, and you can also see we have here the Endorphin Elite 2, which is a shoe that's gathered a lot of attention recently, and we'll definitely talk about in our next video. The foam is going to be softer on these two, and then yeah, the speed, from what people have said and from what early testers are saying, it's a return to form in terms of responsiveness, a little bit better for workouts, but remaining as a do-it-all shoe, and kind of more like the Speed 2 than the Speed 4 is kind of the direction they seem to be headed.
That's fantastic news for me. I absolutely adore that original Speed. I found one of my old pairs from years ago, and I was absolutely ecstatic to see that. And so I will be using that shortly for workouts. As for ranking this, I love these shoes. I think it is unreasonable to go S tier for this because they are going to be narrowing the use case. And I think that is important when you look at these shoes. You know, either it is the best of the best at what it does, at least for when I'm ranking on excitement, the best of the best of what you're going to do, and you're an interesting shoe in general, or you can do it all so well. If you're narrowing the use case of this, I would give this A tier, at least the middle. I'm very excited. I think it's unreasonable to go and put it that high. You might be able to predict where I'm going to put the next one based on that, but you know, this is awesome, and I will be buying this. Once that other Saucony that I have from all those years ago, the original Endorphin Speed, runs out, I will be getting this because it is so fun to train in. You know, I wouldn't say punishing is the right word, but you feel the road. It gives you a boost. You know, it was so cool to do those tempos and harder track workouts in it for the first time. If you haven't experienced anything like it, this is a great opportunity to do so. This is going to be a fun shoe for you if you're interested. A tier for me.
I really loved Saucony as like a middle schooler, and then Nike got a chokehold on me when I was in high school. And I feel like I saw Saucony get back on the map with the Endorphin series and the way they did these fun colorways, like some neon, a tasteful amount. I remember DJ having this like black neon pair that he really loved. So the Endorphin series, I think, has been a really good shoe line for um, Saucony. And I think that keeping it A tier is fair to DJ. I would say I'm probably lower A tier, but that's just because there's some other shoes I'm more excited for. But I think I definitely would be interested to try a shoe in the Endorphin lineup. I have tried the Endorphin Shift a couple of years ago. I don't know that that really counts for anything because it's not really one of like the super trainers, in my opinion. It had like a rocker built in, which was nice for getting faster speeds, but it didn't have any of the other high-end things that the other shoes in the Endorphin lineup have. It was the lowest tier of the Endorphin shoes. So, Evan, back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think just the Endorphin lineup in general, I think is really cool. I have here it's the Endorphin Pro, the first one, and it's in that kind of cool black and neon colorway. You can see the lower stack height, um, the characteristic kind of like beaded Saucony super foam. Really cool shoes. I personally hope they kind of return to a form factor like this, which is what I see this shoe kind of being: lower profile, very aggressive in terms of having the plate be right below your foot. So I think mid A tier is fair, but I think I may be even more excited about this next shoe we're going to talk about, the Endorphin Trainer. So this is a brand new shoe. It's the first generation of this line, and it's kind of marketed as a training companion to this one over here, the Endorphin Elite 2. The way the story goes, they were prototyping this new foam called Incredi-Run, which I'm not the hugest fan of the name, especially considering they were kind of on a roll with adding letters to Power Run and then Power Run PB, and then they kind of just switched it up to Incredi-Run. But it's a whole new formulation. It's apparently incredibly soft and really nice to train in, super responsive. And the elites that they had testing it reported that they wished that they had kind of the same foam in a more daily trainer kind of form factor so that they didn't have to wear the super shoe in order to get that foam feel. So that's how this shoe was born. Because it's a new foam and because it's going to be pretty high end, it's probably going to be pretty expensive. So probably not something I would look at as a daily trainer, but as a potentially very fun workout shoe. This is something I'm excited about. For me personally, I think this is going to be my first S tier level of excitement just because of all the good things I've heard about the Endorphin Elite 2. And as a result, this shoe, I will probably need to figure out a few use cases for it. I could definitely see myself doing workouts in something like this, assuming that it is the kind of shoe I think it will be. So S tier for me, but now we'll have our Saucony specialist chime in on what he thinks about this as opposed to the Endorphin Speed 5.
Yeah, this is the shoe that, if you're going to keep a running shoe rotation, I think it's important, for starters, if you're going to go more than one, you want a daily trainer. And if you're not even going to go for a racer, I would go for something that is exactly like this. This is an important part to add on to. And for me, it's just nice to have something that you can especially take to a long run. It's hard to find a shoe that is for me like what the Speed 3 is for me at this point. It's a shoe you can use for tempos in a workout, but you can also run it to 15, 20 miles. And I can't say the same for that original Endorphin Speed. My legs and feet hurt after I did a 17 miler in it. It was definitely a lot. But, as they've softened it up over time, the range on it is ridiculous. I'm sure people will use this for daily training. I will absolutely be using this for long runs. I'll use it for workouts, and that's where I think I have the most fun in my training. And if you have two shoes that you can get, a daily trainer and this, you can use this to race too. They've really kind of covered all of their bases here. The Speed 3 still rolls. I wouldn't feel too bad racing in it if it was my only choice. It's really fun anyways. And to honestly, Evan, after the introduction you gave it, I am now even more excited to hear how awesome that foam is, despite the name. But this is a very worthy S tier to start with. I'm really excited. I'm going to be keeping this in S tier. And as you know, regarding the price, there are some shoes I've been really tough on. Um, I'm gonna be biased and absolutely turn a blind eye to what is hopefully not too outrageous of a price here. Some of those shoes are worth it. This is going to be that for me. As long as if this is over 250, then I have a problem. That's too much. If we're like, I think what's the speed for right now? 160 to 180? Is it in that range? Right around there?
And jog my memory, is there a plate in
170.
this one?
Yes, there is. There's a 3/4 length carbon plate, and the stack height is, I think it's just barely super stack. I think for a men's size 9 or 10, it's going to be 41. So it could reasonably be used as a long run shoe and or a marathon racer.
That's
Like it
perfect.
starts, the plate is not in the heel, but is in more of the fore and midfoot.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Have they done, is there anything out there about a 3/4 plate maybe lasting a little bit longer or
I think it's
kind
more
of hard to
about
say?
I think it's more about how it feels. I also think some of it is to avoid patents, specifically from Nike. I know like different companies have been trying to avoid when Nike was the first one to do a carbon plate, so nobody else can do a full length fixed curvature carbon plate. So like Adidas does rods, um, some do shanks, some do non full length. So there's a bunch of ways. I imagine for this, it was more to make it less aggressive than the race counterpart, which is going to be the Endorphin Elite 2.
Well, very cool. I think I would imagine this is almost an answer to the Super Blast, to what other shoes, like in other lineups, do you think this is pretty comparable to?
I mean, I think it could be put in a category with like the Zoom Fly 6, I guess maybe some of the other
A
shoes
C
we're talking
trainer?
about. Like, yeah, and people aren't really sure. It'll depend what price point they come out with it at. Like if this is
Hmm.
I personally really hope it's not over $200. People aren't really sure how they're going to be pricing shoes that contain this foam. The Endorphin Elite 2 is probably going to come in at, similar to its predecessor at like 275, maybe a little bump to 285 to be comparable with the Alpha Fly. But as for this shoe in particular, comparisons. I'm not sure. I mean, it's hard because it's people aren't even really sure where it's going to fit in with the lineup relative to existing endorphin product like the Endorphin
Hmm.
Speed, like the Endorphin Pro, which has kind of been pushed into less of a racer role with the introduction of the Endorphin Elite. So it's really a little bit confusing. But I think it'll just kind of be in the mix with a lot of those other super trainers. And like DJ said, because of its high stack height and the potential versatility of this foam for longer stuff, I think it could probably be kind of a plated super blast, probably softer, definitely do it all. So I'm not a direct comparison. I think would be hard.
All right, I'm in. I'm in. I'll keep it S tier for DJ. I'm probably higher A on this type of shoe. It if it ever went on sale, I could definitely see it being very high A for me, and if I loved it, then I would say S. Um, I do hope that they make this gold and orange marbled um, colorway with the white. I think it's really cool looking, so I'm excited to hear what DJ has to say about it when he gets a pair.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to our final super trainer of the day, the Mach X3 from Hoka. Gonna be a hard act to follow, the Endorphin trainer, but this is Hoka's super trainer. It's, I believe, like $180. The X2 came out this year. The X1 was, people liked it. I don't think most people loved it. It wasn't usually highly recommended. I think people oftentimes turn to Hoka more for comfort than for performance. I think some people, if Nike doesn't work for you and Adidas doesn't work for you, I think some people find solace in Hoka because they're pretty different from a lot of carbon plated shoes in terms of their race offerings. You can see, like, for example, the new member of their Cielo series is down here, so that's been something that people have really liked. Prior to that, I mean, they had the Carbon X, which I think was kind of mediocre. It was a lot of people's entry point for carbon fiber because it was, I believe, cheaper, a good amount cheaper than something like the Vaporfly a few years ago. But now there are so many offerings and you can get so much stuff on discount that I think between the Rocket X2 and the Cielo, and now with the Mach X does not actually have a carbon fiber plate. The plate instead is a Pebax foam. So there's kind of a plate of hardened foam down the middle in between these two layers of softer foam. So it's not going to be as aggressive as something with carbon fiber. And I don't think it has as high a stack height as some of the other things we've been talking about. It's also not terribly light. So for me, this shoe is just probably something I would not be very interested in. Again, largely for the reason sort of similar to the Boston 13. I'm not super sure what it would do better than other things on this list or other shoes I already have. So while I'm sure it's going to work great for some people, and I'm sure it's likely to be an improvement over the previous generation, I'm going to be putting this one in kind of low C tier just because unless I get it on some kind of crazy sale, this is not something I'm likely to be turning to in 2025.
I had a pair of the Carbon X's. I'm one of the few. Um, well, not one of the few, but it was my first carbon plated shoe. I absolutely loved the Carbon X. Um, Once Nike shoes started going on sale and it was possible to get a carbon plated shoe for 150, 160, um, it kind of killed the need for me to have a cheaper alternative to carbon plates. Um, with that being said, I do like Hoka as a daily trainer. I just haven't done it in a while because other shoe brands made things that I've gotten more excited about that maybe look a little sexier. So I'm gonna push maybe upper C tier just to be different, but I don't have a strong opinion on this at all.
Lakeland, I think to spoil it without me giving my lengthy little chat, I think you've got this in the right place. I would for sure be taking this Hoka in front of what like a Vomero or an On shoe. But I haven't really got along very well with Hokas in my distant past. I enjoyed the Rincon, but that didn't last any longer than like 200 miles. It bottomed out, which I'm sure won't be an issue for here. They also don't fit me as well. That's why I'm a huge Saucony fan. They fit like a glove. Um, but yeah, that and for that reason, of course, it's biased, but that's why we're doing the list. This is how we feel about it. Um, it's just not something I'm going to get excited for either. When you have what hopefully is around the same price point for that, Saucony Endorphin trainer up there, I would for sure be reaching to that instead of the Hoka trainers here. So yeah, I think upper C tier, Evan, where you moved it to, that's perfect for me.
All right, well, that concludes our super trainer list. Closing thoughts for me would be that I think the super trainer category is in an interesting spot in that it doesn't fully have an identity. Each brand kind of has a slightly different take on the super trainer. If you look at something like Asics, I mean, they've got like the Super Blast 2, but they also have the Magic Speed series, which itself has been changing dramatically in terms of stack height, plate positioning, foam composition, weight. So, I mean, I think it's definitely one to look out for, and I think it's probably the one where there's the greatest variation between brands. And as such, there will be the greatest variability in individual preference for what brand makes the speed trainer that they most enjoy. So I think our bias kind of shone through on this list a little bit, but overall, I think we gave it a pretty fair assessment, and hopefully somebody found some benefit from our categorization. So, Lakeland, you wanna close us off?
Well, I kind of have an idea for another segment. I was wondering if DJ and Evan would kind of want to run through some of the shoes that would have been in this category had they been released this year. So, touching back to the Super Blast 2, how excited were you for that? The Pegasus Plus, and then the Nike Zoom Fly 6, and maybe a short review if you have had the shoe.
So for me, I was a big fan of the Super Blast 1. I have a pair with probably over 600 miles at this point, including some walking miles as I've now retired it from running. I was very excited, therefore, for the 2. I've now gotten the 2. I would say before I had it, my excitement level would have been high A or even potentially S tier, just because I had found so much utility and so much enjoyment out of the first generation. But after having gotten it, I think I personally think it's kind of a little worse than the first edition. It just doesn't seem to have the same versatility. It feels just a little more dull when you kind of pick up the pace in it, and maybe a little clunkier and almost like a little poppier, but not in necessarily a very good way. It feels like it kind of slaps the ground. So that's just kind of my opinion. So based off its performance, a review, I'd maybe put it in B tier because I still think it's a great shoe, but just not as magic of a feeling as I had in the first edition. For the Zoom Fly 6, that's a shoe I was very pleasantly surprised by. I would say after seeing some of the early reviews, my excitement level was high B tier. I thought it was kind of Nike's answer to the evolution that's been going on under a lot of these other companies. Meanwhile, they had been kind of stagnating. The Zoom Fly 5 was notoriously very not good. It had this weird recycled midsole. It was very heavy. It didn't seem to have a lot of pop. The foam just wasn't up to snuff with some of the stuff available at a similar price point, so it was chronically on sale and just overall not very successful. I did try a pair because I was able to get them so cheap, and they just felt heavy and not very energizing. But after having run in the Zoom Fly 6, very surprised with it. I would put it in definitely A tier. To me, it feels almost comparable to the Vaporfly, and to my knowledge, it's one of Nike's only super stack shoes that they currently produce. That's going to be changing in 2025, but I think the Zoom Fly is just over 40 millimeter stack height, and it has a good amount of Zoom X in addition to that carbon fiber plate, which surprises me because when you're running in the shoe, you can really feel the plate, and at the same time, you feel pretty close to the ground while the foam maintains a lot of that support and cushioning. So I've done some longer workouts in that shoe and felt very fresh at the end. So that shoe would be, yeah, high A for me probably. And then the final shoe you mentioned was, what was it, the third one?
Peg Plus.
Peg Plus. DJ, you want to kick us off with the Peg Plus because you also had it?
Yeah, sure. I think that one kind of held, Evan, I'm sure you would agree, like a bit of a mythical status for those who had paid attention or looked back at history. What is that? 2017 Nike. They're starting to drop some of these really awesome racers. I'm still a huge fan of the Pegasus line, just as a daily trainer at that point. And then you have this really interesting Peg Turbo that comes out. And people talk about some durability issues, maybe that I had seen once or twice, but that it was just something really fun and interesting to go train in, kind of a bit of a precursor to what super trainers kind of are now. If super trainer didn't really exist back then, not that I can completely remember other than a flat, I think that maybe would have been one of the first examples. So coming in, I have that at like an S tier excitement because it was something that I always wanted to get my hands on, like a 4% or a Peg Turbo. I could never really find a new pair that was at a reasonable price. For me now, yeah, I'd probably put that at B tier. I was running in it around the time that I had ended up getting injured. So maybe, what was going on around the time has kind of soured my opinion on it, where I took a little bit of time off. The grip is there, so you can definitely use it on gravel trails, which is where I run at, some of my local parks. But I find myself, believe it or not, reaching for an endorphin speed instead. It's just, I find that to do that better. It's more fun. They're definitely the Peg Plus is, a bit weightier. So I have a little bit of a harder time rolling in it. Not a bad shoe whatsoever. I'd say it's expensive for what it does. When, there are some cheaper options for what feels lighter and faster. But I wouldn't knock you if you're a huge fan of it. I think that would make sense to me. But yeah, I'm at a B. I don't, Evan, what do you think about all that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been said before, and I think it's very true that the Peg Turbo, or I guess the Peg Plus, feels like a great shoe for 2019 that was dropped in 2024. It's, that's when people wanted it. That's when it would have been innovative. The general idea is great. I mean, it's something I've always wanted, which is just like a slab of ZoomX foam from Nike with a good upper. For me personally, the upper isn't a great fit, and the ZoomX, I think there's maybe just a little bit too much drop to the extent that I feel like it's really thin underneath my forefoot, which I don't necessarily love given that the heel feels pretty cushioned. So I think as all these other companies have evolved so much over the course of the past 4 years, the Peg Plus, by the time it got released, was just pretty far behind at the price point. If it had been released as like a $140 Pegasus alternative with ZoomX, then I think it would be fantastic. But the fact is, it came out at like $180 or something retail, which, I mean, for that you can get like a PIBA based trainer with carbon fiber plate and a race like upper. That's just not what you were getting from the Peg Plus. So the value proposition wasn't necessarily there. If you could get it at a good sale, but even then, I think it makes more of like a daily trainer or a tempo shoe if you want to hold yourself back than it does like a super trainer. So I don't even necessarily know that it would have belonged in this type of video in general. I mean, even from Nike now, as of just recently, you can get the Zoom Fly 6, which has more ZoomX foam, a carbon fiber plate, and a much better upper. So the Peg Plus, I mean, yeah, I think it was just a little bit too little, too late from Nike, which is a bummer given that obviously their race shoes have continued to dominate and they clearly know how to make a shoe. They just haven't quite nailed that kind of trickle down technology, which would allow their more daily and now workout offerings to be a little more competitive with some of the stuff out there. Another honorable mention for super trainers would be the Magic Speed 5 from Asics. A controversial shoe, given how much they changed from the 4 to the 5. It kind of went from something like kind of mid stack at like, I think 35-ish, give or take a few millimeters of foam with a carbon fiber plate, to like 44 millimeters of stack. It essentially became like a super blast with a plate, which I think is really good. I personally really like that shoe. It is a little heavier as a result, but it just gives you so much cushioning that I think for half marathon or marathon type workouts where you're putting in a lot of miles or even a race specific long run, I think it would be a great shoe. So that one I would probably put in kind of upper B, lower A as well in retrospect. And in terms of excitement level, it would have been hard to know just because I didn't know how all the changes were going to pan out. There wasn't much to base it off of. But I think that shoe has actually turned out to be a much more positive surprise than the Super Blast 2. So definitely recommend giving that one a try. And Now, Lakeland, was there anything else you wanted to add on?
I want to say that the Super Blast 2 is still S tier for me. I will be opening a pair during the holiday season. I bought it already. So, um, with that being said, thank you guys for tuning in. Let us know if there's any super shoes that you think we missed. We kind of hit some honorable mentions that came out maybe later in the year or midway throughout the year. We appreciate your guys' comments. So, light us up if you think there's something that we missed, and if you think there's another video that you'd want us to do in the future. Thanks for watching. Uh, Train healthy, happy, and smart. Peace out.